Hello and welcome to this week's Truth Be Told, a show about all things local to Plymouth town government with me, your host and the town manager, Melissa Arrighi. This show is another way that we're trying to do outreach to the residents in the community and fold you into what's happening with your government. It's a resource for you to find out what is going on, verify what's happening, ask questions. If you have a topic that you would like me to cover, I'm happy to do it here on the show, and we're displaying contact information for you now. So if you hear something, read something, or just want to know about something, we are all here for you. Sometimes the show will go into my town manager's reports, which are always available online. And other times I'll be joined by one or more guests like I am today. If I do have a guest, I will announce it on Twitter. So these have become somewhat of an internal thing that I do, that we guess who's going to be on the show. And this week's was no emergency here. Just a call to fire up your TV for a burning hot show that we think you'll respond to. It's a lot of hints to show that today on the show, we have Fire Chief Ed Bradley, our longtime fire chief who's here with us, as well as Henry Lipe, known as Hank to all of us and hopefully to the residents. And he is the director of our Emergency Management Center. So welcome to the both of you. I'm glad you could be here today. Some of the things that we're going to talk about are ones that you've done often before, either at town meeting or on different shows that you've been on. And I'm not sure if you both were on that regular TV show about COVID-19, but Ed, let's start with you. You've just had so much experience in Plymouth, both in your roles through the fire department and in the long time that you've been chief with us, but also as a resident here. So I think that you're one of the people that works for this town that really knows it the best. Tell us a little bit about your overall career and some of the major changes that you've seen in Plymouth that have to do with fire services.
I started the career with the Plymouth Fire Department in October 1974, and it was, at the time, there was only one station that was staffed. The other two stations were call or volunteer. Volunteers had more or less disappeared, I think, in the early 60s, but they were on call. We got a stipend per year, and then we were paid per hour when we showed up at a fire. And it was assigned to me because I lived down in Pacific Beach. And then in January of '77, that became a full-time position. As the chief at the time was starting to staff those stations, our population was increasing rapidly. The people were leaving the city. The highway had been opened up. The power plant was here. The taxes were low. People were moving into town, and services needed to increase. So they staffed the Management Station. Then it was the Cedarville Station in North Plymouth. Eventually, in 1975, the station in West Plymouth was completed, which is also a shop that was staffed. And in '77, the Bourne Road Station was completed, and that facility was staffed. So that's been 47 years. It's been a long time. When we started, you know, it was what was left over of the on-call department. They were much smaller trucks. They were older. We had a ladder truck. It was 1940 Seagrave. We had two engines. It was 41 and 42. We used the one that was assigned down in Maryland was a 55, but they weren't enclosed cabs. You held onto the back while you were responding to a fire. And even in the wintertime, sometimes, you know, when the hail was out and you're driving down the road on the way to a fire at night in the winter, the face would get so cold and get pelted, it almost felt, you know, like BBs hitting you. But so, and the safety equipment's changed quite a bit. Back then, we were given rubber coats and rubber boots that we pulled up. They what they call three-quarter boots. You pulled them down so that you could work, and when you get to the fire and you wanted to get some protection, you pull them up. And gloves. There was really not a lot of protective equipment out there then, especially in the woods fire area. We just wore clothes like dungarees, things like that wouldn't tear easy as you were trying to run through the woods with the thorns and the brush. But we started buying equipment, obviously, and started some of the minimum criteria changed. The NFPA, the National Fire Protection Agency, started writing criteria for that was nationally accepted, and we started to conform to that, as well as the other departments around it. And I stayed working as a firefighter until November of 2007. Excuse me, to November of 2000, and that was then there was going to be some growth in Department. Chief Fugazi was looking to add 3 more lieutenants, 4 more lieutenants, so there was one on every shift working at Central Station. And I took the test then, and it was my first promotion. So actually, if you look back, it was kind of remarkable because in November of 2000, I was a firefighter and I was assigned to fire alarm. We took the 911 calls and dispatched. And in November of 2007, I was promoted to the chief of the department. So it was a very short period of time. Granted, I long time and worked out of Manamint Station, the West Plymouth Station, the North Plymouth Station, and a little bit out of the old Central Station off and on, which was now San Diego's in the center of town. That's a quick wrap up of what's going on.
Yeah, right. It's such a different world now. And I love that you've seen it all through those stages. I mean, it's a completely professional department now. I mean, volunteer firefighters, I have to imagine they're a thing of a past in most places that are like a city, like Plymouth is in so many ways. And Ed, you must have some nostalgia. I always forget that San Diego's was fire headquarters, I guess. Do you have a little nostalgia for Zero Spooner Street? Because now that's leaving us and we've gone to a beautiful station in North Plymouth.
Yeah, I remember going out there. People wanted to work out there just because of its location. There was a nice little brook behind it that when you get up in the morning, you had coffee, you could sit out back and watch the ducks, swimming by. And wintertime or fall and spring, when the kids are in school, they all walk by the station and there was a crossing guard there. So we were usually out front, and the parents would come by, the kids would come by, and if they were walking the dogs came by, and they always had treats for the dogs.
Now, when you look at this structure of Plymouth, there's been talk through the years of the matrix report that was done years ago, and our structure with the chief and the deputy chiefs and our battalion chiefs. But essentially, there's 3 key areas that you oversee: administration, operations, and emergency management. And I believe you're the one that found us, Hank, who, Hank is also a former fire chief in another state, or maybe it was county, I don't recall now. But Hank, tell us a little bit about when you first came to Plymouth.
So you're correct, Melissa. I'm about the same track as Chief Bradley. I started in the fire service in 1977 as one of those volunteers that you mentioned in a suburb outside of Cincinnati, and worked my way through and have had a long and challenging career, and picked up the second hat in emergency management sometime in the 80s when it started to become big business. And so much like Chief Bradley and other fire chiefs, we wore 2 hats at the time. So my journey has been starting outside of Cincinnati, and then I went to New Hampshire, got the fire chief's job in Windham, New Hampshire, and then went over to Hampton and ran the Hampton Fire Department for 9 years, and also got a lot of experience with the Seabrook nuclear power station and all of the planning and preparedness for that, not to mention the heavy tourism that Hampton Beach draws every summer, much like Plymouth. Then I had an opportunity towards later on to run a fire district in the Seattle region, which was quite an interesting 8 years. An unincorporated area of the massive King County. And so it gave me a great taste of what town management actually does on the other side. So instead of just spending money, I was also introduced and responsible for all of the other pieces that make government run. The other side of the balance sheet, so to speak, the liability insurances and everything that goes with that, personnel issues, of course. And so it was quite an experience. I decided it was time to hang up the fire chief's helmet and found Plymouth. And so here I am. And I'm wrapping up, believe it or not, I'm coming up on my 5th year anniversary.
Wow, are you already? It's unbelievable. I know that on your website, you have, I think it's a vision statement or a mission to protect the Emergency Management Division, protects life, property, and the environment by developing programs and plans that prevent, prepare for, respond to, recover from, and mitigate disasters and emergencies. Now, of course, the minute everybody thinks about you, Hank, and what you and your staff do in the emergency management office is we think about the nuclear power plant. But that is just such a piece of what your role is in this massive community. Can you talk a little bit about storm prediction and what you do to help us with flood threats and those kind of environmental storm issues that come along?
Sure. You know, I often say that a lot of emergency management is invisible, so to speak, to the public, because we try awful hard for everybody to not notice anything. And that's all about the preparedness. And of course, you know, the operational side, the recovery side, everybody knows what's going on. But that preparedness piece is huge. And you're absolutely correct. I mean, we're getting, obviously, it's a hurricane season again, comes right around fast. And whether it's a hurricane or a nor'easter, Chief Bradley and I are watching weather a week ahead of time. And a great example was that Storm Riley in 2018. We were actually, and I think you might even have been in that meeting, we were in a meeting, the first meeting to prepare for Plymouth 400 festivities, when the director of MEMA stood up and said, I hate to break the news, but we have a bad storm coming in. And that was about a week ahead of time. Mm-hmm. But we started working and preparing from that very moment, expecting what Chief Bradley said, I think we're going to have the storm of 78 again. And so we really fully expected White Horse Beach to take the hit. Obviously it went north of here a little bit, and Quincy took that hit. But we started working that storm ahead of time and had everything in place between the sheltering, the warning signs, the public information, and the staffing. We were ready to go. And of course, the rest, we know as Paul Harvey would say, now we know the rest of the story. Some 3 years later, we just wrapped up the recovery piece by working very hard with FEMA and MEMA to be able to recover 75% of some of those costs that the town incurred. So we do a lot of work, again, preparedness ahead of time, and the recovery work, which is basically trying to recover not only the quality of life for the folks, but the financial side and the taxpayers to get some of that money back that the town had spent to get back in business as a result of the storm.
And this is not a disparaging comment to our partners that help us get that money back, but you do such a tremendous amount of work, and there is so much follow-up that needs to be done in order to recoup some of those funds. I mean, the fact that you just said it's been a couple years and we're just getting back that money now, I mean, it's great. You have to be persistent, but it is a ton of bureaucracy to get through. And when you talk about the partners, Hank, I want the community and people watching the show to know how many areas you partner with, federal level, state level, and then even at the county and the local level. I mean, who are those offices or groups or agencies that you work with all the time?
So we are constantly working with the Massachusetts Emergency Management Agency. The town has had a history of that with the radiological emergency response plan. We work all the time with them, with FEMA. FEMA is would you say the parent agency of emergency management federally, and they're the ones that actually release the grant money that we enjoy once in a while into the state system, and then we work with the state to apply and hopefully get approval on those grants. Also, what we have available to us is we have a chat line right with the weather forecasters it's in Norton now. So the Boston National Weather Service, I can chat directly with them as I have on numerous occasions to better understand the impact locally to Plymouth and the storms. Some of the other contacts that we have, of course, is the regional emergency management structure talking to emergency management directors in the entire New England area. I mean, we're all in it together. And I think that's, that's the unique thing about living in New England is it might be a huge conglomerate of land space, but it's really a lot of small towns. And we all talk and have the same, we're all in it and we're all together. I can't tell you how many times I interact with Barnstable County emergency management folks and watch those storms as they're coming in and get as much information as we can. So it's a constant line of communications from the South Shore all the way up, basically throughout New England, New Hampshire, Maine, and even into Vermont. I mean, if you look back at Irene a few years ago, it missed here and devastated Vermont. Yeah, so we're all on edge and we all have to prepare and fortunately deal with what is dealt to us. We deal with it.
Right. A lot of sleepless nights. I remember talking to you pretty late some of the evenings and pretty early.
Let me tell you that the 36 hours from Riley pretty much did me in.
Yeah, right. I can understand that.
I used to be able to do that as a young firefighter, but now it's a little challenging.
Yeah, it takes more of a toll. Talk to me, same. But also your relationship with the American Red Cross has been so helpful here. Your day-to-day working relationship with our Public Works Department, and sort of in many ways, as frustrated as we can get with them, your coalition or established relationship with utility companies, because they were big storms.
So I'm glad you brought that up. That's a great point. We worked, as you were part of, we worked diligently to prepare for last winter and had our contract with the American Red Cross as a partner for a major shelter at Plymouth North High School. And the challenging part was to make sure that we had segregation and because of COVID. So we actually had it set up for 2 separate shelters in the high school, ready to go in case we needed to open. And it was a tremendous amount of work and planning to have that done. Kudos off to the school facilities director at the schools, to the Red Cross management and to town management to have that ready to go. I think that was a huge achievement last fall when you think about all of the stressors and all of the uncertainties that we were faced, including going into that heavy second wave of COVID exposures. So I'm just on the phone with the Red Cross talking about it again. And this time that we do that, we call it blue sky planning. And that's really what it is. Because we want it done ahead of time. We don't need to react to it. Everything's in place. Like I said, we work awful hard so people don't really notice what's going on. when it's open, it's ready to go. It was an amazing task, and it took, I guess, and remember, it was a couple months before we had everything finalized. Mm-hmm. It's a huge challenge. And the Red Cross in the past with the shelters at the high school that we've been able to open. And then we had the one open again. I go back to Riley down at Manamet Elementary. I mean, that was huge. That worked out great. And we were prepared with the National Guard units to be able to just basically pick up the people that were stuck or got trapped at Whitehorse Beach and take them up to the school. Folks could have walked up there. We had Red Cross crews, we had National Guard, and of course, a full complement of police and firefighters ready to rock and roll. So, fortunately it missed, all things considered, it missed Whitehorse Beach to the impact that we expected. I go back to Chief Bradley's knowledge of his years here. His knowledge of what happened in Storm of '78 gave us the ability to fully prepare for that storm. It was amazing. It's funny, somebody would ask me a question, I don't know the answer. I said, hold on, I'll ask Chief Bradley because he knows. He's just a wealth of information, that guy. So,
honestly, Hank, I feel the same way. I mean, historic knowledge in Plymouth really, really matters. And I know a lot of us, not just me as the town manager, but a lot of the different department and division heads will go to Ed. And while we're praising you, Ed, I don't want that white hair that you're so known for getting any bigger here. But when Hank talks about stressors, one of the things that I know you always worry about during a storm or an event or some kind of emergency is particular areas of the town, especially when it comes to like in a snowstorm, trying to reach certain, typically elderly populations where we don't know if they're going to be able to contact us. So you and I worked together once where you actually sent fire crews around, as well as we partnered with Brewster Ambulance, who's been a great partner to Plymouth, to actually go door to door. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I remember one of the snowstorms we had when it was a blizzard, and we had lost power for a couple of days. And places you start worrying about, especially after power's been out for 4 or 5 hours, are all the mobile home parks.
Right.
Those housing units cool down rather quickly. And for the most part, they're all over 55 and even older. So we even had crews of police detectives that obviously there was nothing that they could be doing during the blizzard, and they were out with all of us, knocking on doors, checking on people, moving them to a shelter so where there was heat, and electricity. A lot of them also have they're on oxygen. You need electricity in order for their oxygen to work, and they need to have regular medication. And if you're living in the dark and you don't have any heat, that's pretty tough. We've had a couple of times when it's happened during hurricanes, and it's just the opposite. Now we're worried about the temperature and the humidity, and we know that we need to get them. In order for them to stay healthy, we need to get them somewhere with electricity and air conditioning and medical staff around that can check on them. But yeah, let's. You know where the groups of people are. We have a list anyway because we keep that up with Eversource. Those areas of town are prioritized to return power. If they can't return power, then we will probably have to transport them somewhere where they can be cared for and have electricity. So that goes on all the time.
I remember some frustrating meetings with you, and anybody that's watching knows that Chief Bradley can be a force to be reckoned with at times when he is passionate or not happy about something. And we were at a meeting, and it was with the utility companies as well as with at the time, it was Jordan Hospital. And it was just so frustrating because I think it was the same storm, and there were so many pockets of town that had been out for just too long. And heated meeting, using that term lightly, but it was a pretty tough meeting because I think everybody is exhausted. We're all extremely worried, and we tend to react strongly in that situation because we know we have to move quickly. So I think that's something I will certainly always think of when we're preparing for these storms and afterwards, that if I need a little help moving these utility companies along, I know who to go to that will get that point across pretty clearly.
That gentleman from Verizon and I are very good friends nowadays.
That's awesome, Ed. So one of the things that we haven't had a chance to talk about yet, and I know we don't have a lot of time left, is I really wanted to talk a little bit about facilities because we do have 7 fire locations. They're all important. People will talk about, closing one down or what's happened to the structures and how much money are we putting into them. And I almost think we need to do a separate show on that. But Ed, can you at least do a rundown for me on, I'd like the public to know statistically, how busy they are and how many actual, everybody in the fire department, how much staff we have?
Yeah, the fire department has 140 employees, and there are some that are in fire prevention that their job is, they support the suppression crews as needed, but their job is out every day looking at everything that's going on being built. Obviously, if we can back up and make sure that everything being built is done so at the current code where it belongs, we're going to make the town safer. So they're pretty busy with that, and they get help with the suppression staff when they get busy in that particular problem. Everything that gets built in town, whether it's a road, a development, a single family home, a motel, anything, approval has to be done by the fire department. We have people that look over the plans. Quite often, we just did a big one with the town of Kingston with the Amazon facility. And of course, they're building those all throughout the country. And they, sometimes we find that the larger companies like that are working all over the country aren't as well aware of the Massachusetts codes and don't want to follow them as they should be. And we have to, kind of stern with them. And we were able to get everything done that needed to be done because they're usually dealing in areas where there's not a lot of inspectors and people really want the building up and they want the jobs. They don't really care about, well, I shouldn't say they don't care. They're not as stern and strict to make sure that the codes are being followed.
Persuasive, Ed. Persuasive instead of stern and strict. We're persuasive.
Yeah, it's a kind of gentler world, yes. And the suppression staff works out of 7 fire stations: North Plymouth, West Plymouth, the Central Station, Manamet, the one that's in the Pine Hills that covers quite a large area, Cedarville, and of course the Bourne Road. The one in the Pine Hills, that particular station covers 22 square miles. That's their first due area. Now that is the size of the city of Brockton, which has 7 fire stations covering 22 square miles. So we are very efficient where the stations were placed. As it turns out, that's where the people live. That's where the calls for service are. But we had recently worked with, when we were doing some renovations on the station, we want to make sure that before we spent a lot of money on any rehab, are they in the right location for what we're doing? And if not, tell us where we should go so that we won't put a lot of money into a facility. We found out that they are actually in the right locations. The next question was, if we want to be able to meet the NFPA code, which says that we should arrive within 6 minutes to any address in town. We knew that the 7 stations weren't enough, but we're only being able to do that about 74% of the time, just because of our size. That's the size of the town is really the Achilles heel for the town. It costs the town a lot of money for infrastructure, police, and fire just because of its size. So our question was, if we wanted to be able to get everywhere in town in 6 minutes, like most of our neighbors are able to do, how many fire stations would we need? And it was given to that company, and they were going to report back in a week, and we all had a little bet going on. Some said 11, some said 12, 10. When he returned, he told us that we would need 18 fire stations. Obviously, we're not going to be able to do that, and there are going to be areas of town that it's going to take a long time for us to get there. And when the first crew gets there, they're going to be on their own for quite a while until the next crew shows up. Something that the firefighters in other towns around us don't have to deal with, which is why our apparatus is expensive, because we're giving them everything they're going to need to be able to operate alone for a period of time, knowing that there are these areas of town that are just so far away and take so long to get there. And when you try to put all that stuff on a truck that's still maneuverable and able to be used, it gets quite expensive.
Yeah, expensive and challenging. And I can't believe, on Truth Be Told, you heard here the fire chief saying, the potential for, if we just look at the statistics for all those stations. So that's not happening. Just telling everybody that is, if you wanted to absolutely meet those standards, that's what you would need. Listen, I can't believe it. I can't believe I'm saying this, but thank you so much, Fire Chief Bradley and Hank, for being with me today. That is going to wrap up this week's show. I hope that you all join us next week. We'll have another great guest on the show, and we'll show the dates and times that you can see the show with Ed and Hank. We'll have those available to you right after this show ends. So thanks so much, and we'll see you next week.